picture. A wooden ship in the year 1918, riding low in the water off the coast of Barbados, her hull painted battleship grey, her decks crowded with manganese ore, heavy enough to hold her steady through any storm. A quick word before we go deeper. These stories don't end. There's a new unsolved one waiting here every night. If that's the kind of thing you'd leave on in the dark, subscribe and I'll keep them coming. Her name was the USS Cyclops. She was 320 feet long, built of good American steel, and she carried 306 men, sailors, officers, cooks, engineers, fathers and sons, and boys who'd never seen the ocean before that year. On the 4th of March, she pulled up her anchor and turned her nose north toward Baltimore. The sky was gentle. The sea was flat as a plate of polished tin. The wind rolled soft across her decks. She was never seen again. No wreckage, no lifeboats, no oil slicks spreading like dark ink across the swell. No radio call for help. No bodies drifting in the currents. 306 men, and one enormous ship simply gone, as if the water itself had reached up and folded them into its pocket. The Navy searched for weeks. The papers wrote about it for months. And in the end, the report closed with a phrase that would echo through the next 100 years of American storytelling. The disappearance, they said, remains one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the sea. That patch of ocean where the Cyclops vanished is warm and blue and famous now. You know its name. You've heard it whispered in late-night television specials and paperback books with silver letters on the cover. The Bermuda Triangle. A rough shape drawn on a map between Miami, Bermuda, and the tip of Puerto Rico. A slice of the western Atlantic where, so the story goes, ships and planes and people simply stop existing. But here's the thing about that triangle. It was never a place. Not really. No sailor ever crossed a line and saw the water change color. No pilot ever watched a boundary rise up out of the waves. The triangle was drawn on paper long after the ships had gone missing, sketched into being by a magazine writer in the 1960s with a pen and a ruler and a hunch. Before that, it had no shape, it had no name. It was just ocean, warm ocean, deep ocean, moving ocean, silent ocean. And yet the stories piled up like driftwood on a beach after a storm. Columbus sailed through here and wrote of a compass that trembled and lied. A squadron of Navy bombers lifted off from Fort Lauderdale in December of 1945 and flew straight into the blue haze and were never heard from again. Cargo freighters loaded with iron ore, fishing boats, yachts full of vacationers, small planes carrying pilots who knew these waters like the veins on their own hands. Gone, not always, not even often, but often enough that people began to notice, often enough that a certain kind of writer began to whisper about it, often enough that a country started to wonder if something was down there, waiting. Tonight we're going to sit with that wondering. We're going to travel back through the long, strange history of a haunted stretch of water. We'll meet the sailors who first blamed the sea. We'll walk the docks of old Bermuda, where merchants passed the whispers around like a bottle. We'll listen to the radio calls of Flight 19 as they crackled and dimmed. We'll follow the pulp writer who drew the triangle onto a map and gave the mystery a name. And we'll ask a question that nobody has ever really answered. How does an ocean earn a reputation? How does a place with no borders and no landmarks and no monsters become the most famous cursed water in the world? Is there something truly strange in that warm blue current? Some pocket of the earth where the ordinary rules of navigation soften and slip? Or is the Bermuda Triangle something else entirely? A mirror a story America told itself, a shape we drew around our own fear of the deep. The truth, if there is one, sits somewhere between the salt spray and the yellowed newspaper clippings, between the Coast Guard reports and the paperbacks that sold 10 million copies, between the physics of rogue waves and the ache in the human heart that needs the sea to be more than just water. So settle in. The night is long, the water is warm, and the ocean, as always, is keeping its secrets. Picture a stretch of ocean shaped like a lopsided kite. One point rests near Miami, where the palm trees lean in the evening wind. Another point sits at the little island of Bermuda, a pink and green speck alone in the blue. The third point drifts down to Puerto Rico, where the mountains fall straight into the sea. Draw a line between those three places and you have your triangle. Inside those lines, the water changes moods more often than a nervous cat. The warm current called the Gulf Stream runs through here like a river inside the ocean. It moves north, out of the Caribbean at about 4 miles an hour, carrying tropical heat up the American coast. The water in that current can be a full 10 degrees warmer than the water beside it. When cold air from the north slides over that warm river, storms bloom out of a clear sky in minutes. Sailors used to say the weather in this patch had a mind of its own. The surface of the water shifts color as you cross it. Along the coast, the sea looks green and cloudy, thick with sand stirred up from the shallows. Farther out, it turns a hard cobalt blue, deep enough to hold whole mountain ranges below. Farther still, in the eastern part of the triangle, the water takes on a strange purple sheen where floating weeds gather in wide brown mats. That weedy patch has a name older than the country. They call it the Sargasso Sea. The Sargasso is a slow spinning bowl of water, held in place by 4 currents that circle it like the walls of a bathtub. Nothing much moves inside. The wind dies. The surface goes glassy and still. Yellow-brown seaweed floats there, in ribbons and clumps, some of it older than the sailors who first wrote about it. Tiny crabs live in the weeds. Baby eels drift through on their way to European rivers. And underneath all that quiet, the ocean drops to more than 3 miles deep. The bottom of the triangle is not one thing. In some places, the seafloor slopes down gentle and sandy, like a beach that keeps going. In other places, it plunges straight down into trenches so deep no light has ever touched them. The Puerto Rico Trench, near the southern point, goes down more than 5 miles. Drop the tallest mountain in the eastern United States into that trench and it would vanish, with a mile of dark water still above it. The weather above all this water is a full-time performer. Hurricanes are born to the east and roll west across the triangle. In the late summer, waterspouts twist up out of calm afternoons, like slow grey ropes. Squalls come rushing in from the horizon, with sheets of rain that hide the sun. Then, 20 minutes later, everything goes still and gold again, and the flying fish glitter above the swells. The sky in this part of the Atlantic gets its own kind of light. In the morning, the horizon takes on a soft pearl color, like the inside of an oyster shell. By midday, the blue overhead is so bright it hurts to look at. The clouds pile up in tall white towers, thousands of feet high, moving slow as ships at sunset. The whole bowl of sky burns pink and orange and violet, and the water underneath turns to hammered copper. Time period matters here, because the triangle legend does not belong to one century. It gathers pieces from many. Wooden Spanish galleons with square sails once creaked across these waters, their holds heavy with silver from the New World. Later came English merchant ships with tall masts and canvas rigging. then American schooners carrying cotton and sugar, then steam replaced sail, and iron replaced wood, and the ships grew huge and painted grey. Then came the airplanes, buzzing high above the swells with radios crackling in their cockpits. Each era added its own losses to the tally. Each generation of sailors and pilots looked down at the same blue-green water and told the same nervous stories. The clothes changed. The tools changed. The lanterns became electric bulbs, and the sextants became radar screens. But the ocean below stayed exactly what it had always been. Warm on top, cold beneath, miles deep, full of currents that pull things sideways and down. This is the world our story lives in, a big triangle of restless ocean, ringed by tourist beaches and old British forts and Spanish churches. On any given afternoon, a pleasure boat drifts across the top of it, while 3 miles of water waits below. That's the setting. Now we can talk about the people who first began to whisper about it. Before the triangle had a name, before pilots vanished from radio waves, before pulp writers drew lines on maps, there were sailors. Ordinary men in wool coats and salt-stained boots, men who kept logs in cramped handwriting and worried about the weather, the way farmers worry about rain. They are the first people in this story, and they lived long before anyone thought to be afraid of that particular stretch of sea. Picture a Portuguese captain in the late 15th century. His name has been lost to time, but men like him crossed the Atlantic in wooden ships no bigger than a modern house. His hands are rough as bark. His face is dark from the sun and creased around the eyes from squinting at horizons. He sleeps in his clothes. He eats hard biscuit and salt fish and drinks water that tastes like the barrel it came from. When the wind dies, he waits. When the wind rises, he holds on. These early sailors carried simple tools: a compass in a wooden box, a cross staff for measuring the height of the sun, a lead line to test the depth of the sea. That was it. No maps of the deep ocean, no radio, no engine, just canvas sails and rope, and the memory of older men who had made the crossing before. They spoke of the sea, the way farmhands speak of a ball that has thrown a rider, with respect, with a little fear, with the sense that the animal has moods and might turn on you without warning. This was not the ocean of tourist brochures. This was a grey, heaving thing that could kill you in 100 quiet ways. The first sailor to blame the sea, in the way we mean it, was probably a man whose name nobody remembers. He came back to port with fewer crewmen than he left with. He stood on a wooden dock in Lisbon or Cadiz or Bristol and told the harbour master what happened. A storm came from nowhere. A shipmate went over the rail and could not be found. A cargo shifted in the night, and 2 men died beneath the barrels. The sea did it. The sea took them. That phrase mattered. The sea did it. It moved the weight of the loss off the shoulders of the living. It made the ocean the responsible party. And once a man could say those words, other men could say them too. The sea became a character in every returning sailor's story. Sometimes cruel, sometimes generous, always powerful, always listening. By the time Spanish and Portuguese ships were crossing to the New World in regular numbers, the Western Atlantic had earned a specific reputation among these men. It was strange water. The currents ran fast and warm. The winds could die for weeks and then rise in an hour. Compasses behaved oddly near certain islands. Great mats of yellow weed floated in the calm zones and tangled around rudders like the fingers of something under the surface. The sailors gave the weed a name, Sargasso, from the Portuguese word for a small grape, because the weed carried little round bladders that looked like fruit. Whole ships would drift into the Sargasso Sea and sit there for days, Sails limp, water flat as a mirror, the weed brushing gently against the hull. Men would lean over the rail and stare down into the clear blue water and see nothing, just depth, just the endless blue going down forever. They kept journals. Some of those journals still exist, sitting in glass cases in museums in Seville and Lisbon. The paper is brown and soft as old cloth. The ink has faded to the color of weak tea, but the words are still there. Complaints about the heat, notes about the birds, sketches of strange fish, and every so often a line that stops you cold. A ship that was seen at dawn and gone by dusk. A light on the water that no man could explain. A compass that swung west when the sun was clearly setting in the west. These were not superstitious fools. These were working men. They knew the sea. They trusted their tools. When they wrote that something was strange, they meant it, and their strangeness, written down in cramped handwriting on cheap paper, became the first quiet thread of a story that would grow for 500 years. The people who started this legend were not writers or dreamers. They were sailors, tired men with sore backs and salt in their beards, and they were the first to look at that particular water and feel in their bones that something about it was not quite ordinary. Picture the deck of a small wooden ship in the autumn of 1492. The wood is warm underfoot from a long day of Atlantic sun. Ropes creak in slow, patient rhythms. Salt has dried in white patterns across the canvas of the sails. A young sailor coils a line by hand, wrapping it in the same loops his father taught him, the same loops his grandfather knew. This is the ordinary world of the sea. The ship is the Santa Maria, and her captain is a red-haired Genoese man named Cristobal Colom. History will call him Christopher Columbus. On this stretch of the voyage he is not yet famous. He is only a man on a wooden deck, staring west across an ocean that seems to have no end. The daily life aboard that ship moved to a slow, gentle drumbeat. Sailors woke before dawn. They ate hard biscuits and salted fish. They drank watered wine from wooden cups and swept the deck with stiff bristled brooms. The cook lit a small fire in a box of sand, and the smoke curled up into rigging that smelled of tar and hemp. Boys climbed the masts with the ease of squirrels, calling out what they saw from above. The sea in those weeks was calm and blue and warm. The water shimmered like polished glass under the noon sun. At night, it turned to black silk stitched with silver. Dolphins sometimes ran along the bow, their grey backs slicing the surface in silent arcs. Flying fish leapt from the swells and skittered across the water like thrown stones. The men leaned on the rail and watched them, and the hours passed as gently as clouds. Columbus kept 2 logs during that voyage. One was true, and one was softened for the crew, so the men would not know how far from Spain they had truly sailed. He wrote by candlelight in a small wooden cabin. His quill scratched across the page in the slow, careful hand of a man who trusted the sea to behave. He noted the wind. He noted the sun. He noted the fish and the birds and the color of the water. And every day, without fail, he checked his compass. The compass was a small round thing set in a wooden box called a binnacle. Inside, a slim iron needle floated on a pivot, held by nothing but its own strange love of the north. To a sailor in 1492, the compass was the closest thing to magic that daily life allowed. It was steady. It was faithful. It pointed the same way every morning and every night, in fog and in sun, in storm and in calm. A sailor could trust his compass the way a farmer trusts the sunrise. That is why the log entry from September 13th of that year stopped Columbus in his tracks. He wrote that the needle no longer pointed to the North Star. It had drifted. It had wandered. It leaned toward the northwest, quietly, as if listening to a voice only it could hear. Columbus did not tell the crew. He knew what sailors did when the small comforts of the sea began to fail. He watched the needle for days. He compared it to the stars at night. He measured and remeasured, and the drift held. The compass, the one steady thing in a world of water, had begun to dance. We know now what he was seeing. The difference between true north, the pole of the earth, and magnetic north, the pole where the iron needle points, is called declination. It shifts across the surface of the ocean like an invisible current. Every sailor since has learned to correct for it. But Columbus did not know that. To him, it was simply a wrongness in the one instrument he could not afford to doubt. For the rest of that voyage, the daily life of the Santa Maria went on. The men ate their biscuits. The boys climbed the masts. The cook lit his little fire in its box of sand. Dolphins still ran along the bow. Flying fish still leapt in silver arcs. The ordinary rhythms of the sea rolled forward, warm and slow and unbroken. And yet, somewhere beneath all of it, a small unease had entered the wooden world of the ship. A compass had wandered. The sea had done something the sea should not do. Columbus wrote it down in his true log, in that careful hand, and then he closed the book and blew out the candle. The ocean that night was calm as a sleeping cat. The stars turned overhead, and in that patch of warm western water, a legend had just quietly, gently taken its first breath. Step out of Spain now, out of Columbus's cabin with its swinging lamp and its trembling compass. Move forward almost 200 years, cross the wide blue back of the Atlantic, and set your feet down on a small hooked island of pink sand and cedar trees. This is Bermuda in the late 1600s. The air smells of salt and lime wash. White houses crouch low against the wind. Their roofs are made of stacked coral slabs, painted the color of sea foam, sloped to catch the rain. The harbor at St. George's holds a forest of masts. Sloops from Boston, frigates from Bristol, slow, wide-bellied merchant ships from Charleston, loaded with rice and indigo. Sailors in tar-stained shirts move along the docks. They carry barrels of molasses and rolls of tobacco leaf as brown as old paper. The taverns lean against each other along the narrow lanes. Their windows glow amber at dusk, and the sound of fiddle music drifts out over the water. Inside one of those taverns, a man leans close to another man over a scarred wooden table. He speaks softly. He is a merchant captain, and his hands are wrapped around a clay cup of rum. He has just come in from the west. His ship was chased for 3 days by weather he cannot describe. Not a storm exactly, something else. A sky the color of pewter with no wind under it. A sea flat as a mirror, and yet somehow rolling. He tells the other man that his compass wandered like a drum. He tells him the stars did not sit where they should have sat. The other man nods. He has heard this before. He has heard it from a Dutch trader out of Curacao. He has heard it from a Portuguese pilot who came in from the Azores. He has heard it whispered by an old African sailor who spoke 6 languages and feared none of them. The stories all rhyme. Something waits in the water between Bermuda and the Florida coast, something that dulls the needle and eats the wind. These are the first whispers. They travel from mouth to mouth in the taverns and along the wharves. They are not written down in any log. They are not printed in any newspaper. They are the kind of talk that lives in the low light between 2 men who have both smelled the same strange air. Bermuda, in these years, is a place that gathers such talk. The island sits alone in the middle of nothing. To the east, the empty Atlantic. To the west, the long, dark shape of the American colonies. Every ship going between them touches Bermuda sooner or later. Its coves fill with fresh water and salted pork. Its shipwrights patch splintered hulls with cedar planks that smell like a spice cabinet, and its taverns fill, night after night, with men who have seen things. They speak of the Sargasso to the south, a patch of ocean matted with brown weed that floats in slow spirals. Ships sail into it, and their hulls drag as if a hand has closed around the keel. They speak of squalls that appear from clear sky in the space of a heartbeat. They speak of nights when the sea glows green from below, lit by nothing anyone can name. One old sailor, said to be Cornish, tells a story every winter about a ship he calls the Rose of London. He says he saw her drifting off the Bermuda reefs, with her sails set and her wheels spinning. He says he climbed aboard with 3 other men. The kettle in the galley was warm. The table was set. A book lay open in the captain's cabin, its ink still wet. But not one soul walked the deck. Not one body lay below. The ship's boat still hung in its davits, dry and untouched. Nobody knows if the Cornishman tells the truth. Nobody knows if the Rose of London ever existed. The story might be his invention, polished for the price of another cup of rum. Yet the story spreads. It crosses to Charleston. It crosses to Boston. It crosses back to London on the tongues of homebound crews. And somewhere in its retelling, it becomes something more than one old man's yarn. It becomes a shape, a hint, a first outline of a thing that will not have a name for another 250 years. The merchants in Bermuda pull their coats tighter. They pay their bills. They kiss their wives on the low white steps of their cedar houses. And they sail west again, into water that behaves most days exactly as water should. Most days, not all. By the middle of the 20th century, America had grown into a country that lived with one eye on the sea. The East Coast stretched from Maine down through Florida like a long grey ribbon, dotted with harbour towns and shrimping villages and quiet navy ports. And in every one of those towns, people talked. They talked on the porches of clapboard houses. They talked in diners with checkered floors and coffee that never stopped pouring. They traded stories the way children trade marbles, each one worth a little more than the last. In the salt-stained taverns of Norfolk, old fishermen sat with weathered hands wrapped around thick glass mugs. Their skin looked like tanned leather. Their eyes had that far-off look sailors get when they've stared at too much water for too many years. They spoke in low, slow voices about ships that left port and never came back. Not storms, not wrecks, just gone. Sailed clean off the edge of the world, they said, and swirled their beer as if the foam might spell out an answer. Down in Charleston, on evenings when the Spanish moss hung heavy from the live oaks, the church steps became a kind of courtroom. Widows in dark dresses gathered there after Sunday service. Some of them had lost husbands to the sea. Some had lost brothers or sons. They shared their grief in careful, measured sentences. And every so often, one of them would mention a strange detail. A husband who dreamed of green water for 3 nights before he sailed. A son who wrote a letter home saying the compass had turned lazy near the Florida Straits. Small things, quiet things, the kind of things that stack up like stones on a grave. In the general stores of the Outer Banks, the wood floors creaked under the boots of shrimpers and crabmen. Shelves held tin cans and bags of flour, and jars of pickled things with cloudy labels. A pot-bellied stove burned in the corner, even in warm weather, because old men liked the sound of it popping. There, the talk turned to lights on the water. Every man had seen them, or knew a man who had. Blue lights that traveled just under the surface, green flashes that hung above the swells like curtains. Nobody could name what they were, but everybody nodded when the subject came up. Nodding was cheaper than explaining. The country itself was nervous in those years. 2 wars had come and gone. Ships full of young men had crossed the Atlantic, and some of them had not come home. The ocean had swallowed convoys and submarines and merchant vessels by the hundreds. Every coastal family had a name to speak softly. So when a new ship went missing off Bermuda, or a small plane vanished near the Bahamas, the news landed in an America already primed to imagine the worst. The coast felt haunted, because the coast was haunted, at least by memory. In Miami, the docks buzzed with a different kind of gossip. Charter boat captains with sunburnt noses and cracked lips spoke of sudden fog banks that came out of nowhere. They said the water sometimes turned a strange milky color for no reason. They said seabirds went quiet in certain patches, as if the birds knew something the men did not. These captains were not superstitious by nature. They ran their boats for money and did not spook easy. But when they talked among themselves, away from the tourists, their voices dropped. The Gullah communities along the Georgia coast held their own memories, older than the country itself. They spoke of the water as something alive, something that took what it wanted and gave back what it chose. Grandmothers told children not to point at the sea after dark. Fishermen tied small knots into their nets before they set out. Little charms against the deep. When word of new disappearances reached these communities, nobody was surprised. The sea had always been like this, they said. White folks were just now catching up. Bermuda, too, had its own version. Islanders talked about the reefs like they were sleeping animals. They told tales of the Sargasso mats drifting past their shores like green ghost gardens. They remembered the merchant ships of 2 centuries earlier, the ones that had come into port with wild-eyed captains and stories about invisible currents. All these voices swirled together into one thick chorus. No single person held the whole picture. Each one carried a piece, a fragment, a splinter of the same strange mirror, and somewhere out beyond the horizon, the warm water kept doing whatever it had always done, saying nothing, keeping its silence like a promise. To understand why this stretch of water gathered so much fear, you have to go back to a spring morning in 1918. The world was at war. American ships crossed the Atlantic in long grey lines, hauling coal and iron and men. And one of the biggest ships in the whole United States Navy was a collier called the USS Cyclops. She was a strange-looking vessel, long and low, with tall coal cranes rising from her deck like the ribs of some great iron beast. The Cyclops was over 500 feet from bow to stern. Her hull was painted a dull war grey. 2 rows of derricks stood along her spine, black against the sky, giving her the look of a floating factory. She could carry over 10,000 tons of coal in her belly. That was the kind of load that could feed a whole fleet of warships for weeks. On the morning of March 4th, she pulled out of Barbados with a full hold of manganese ore, bound for Baltimore. She never got there. 306 men sailed on her that day, sailors and officers and passengers. Some were going home to see their wives. Some had never seen the sea before that winter. There were consuls and prisoners and a handful of Marines. The ship carried a captain named George Worley, a heavy German-born man with a bad temper and a soft accent he tried to hide. The war made people nervous about German accents. It made them nervous about a lot of things. The Cyclops steamed north into the warm blue water of the Western Atlantic. She sent no distress call. She left no wreckage. She left no oil slick. She simply stopped being. When she failed to arrive in Baltimore, the Navy waited a few days, then a few more. Then they began to search. Cruisers combed the shipping lanes, planes flew low over the swells, divers checked the harbors. Nothing, not a plank, not a lifeboat, not a body. It was as if the sea had opened up a soft mouth and swallowed her whole, then closed again without a ripple. To this day, the loss of the Cyclops is the single largest non-combat loss of life in the history of the United States Navy. 306 souls gone in silence. And the men in Washington could not explain it. President Wilson himself said only the sea knows what happened to the Cyclops, and the sea has not told. The theories came quickly. Some said a German submarine had found her and sent her down. But German records after the war showed no U-boat in that patch of ocean on that day. Others said Captain Worley had turned traitor and sailed her to Germany. But no German port ever saw her. Some whispered that the manganese ore in her hold had shifted in a storm and rolled her over so fast the radio operator never had time to reach for his key. That theory has weight. Manganese is heavy and slick when wet, and the Cyclops was known to be overloaded that trip. Others pointed at the weather. Storm reports from those days show rough seas along her route. A rogue wave, tall as a building, could snap an old ship in half between one breath and the next. And the Cyclops was old. Her sister ships would later go down in strange ways too. One of them, the Proteus, vanished in the same waters in 1941. Another, the Nereus, disappeared just a few weeks after that. Same route, same cargo, same silence. 3 sister ships, all swallowed by the same warm patch of ocean. That kind of thing sticks in the mind of a sailor. The Cyclops became the first ghost of the modern triangle, long before anyone drew lines on a map, long before pulp writers dreamed up the name Bermuda Triangle. Her story sat like a heavy stone in the collective memory of the Navy. Officers spoke of her in low voices at dinner. Widows in Norfolk kept her picture on the mantle. And out in the fleet, young sailors passed her name down as a warning about that stretch of sea south of Bermuda. The truth is probably ordinary. A heavy load, a rough sea, a tired hull, a captain pushing his luck. The truth is probably a rolling wave in the black hours before dawn. But the truth is also that no one alive can say for sure. 306 men went down and left no witness. And when a story leaves no witness, the imagination steps in and fills the empty water with something older and stranger and far more patient than any storm. By the spring of 1918, the Cyclops had been gone for a month, and the newspapers had begun to circle the story like gulls around a cooling deck in New York. Editors sat in wood-paneled rooms with cigars burning low in glass trays. The room smelled of ink and cold coffee. Outside, the city moved on, but inside, the story of the missing ship had become a small, warm ember that would not go out. There was a young reporter, whose name the record does not keep, who took the story to heart. Picture him in a rumpled brown suit, with ink stains on his cuffs. He worked from a wooden desk, stacked high with cabled messages from Barbados, from Rio, from Norfolk. He kept a map of the Atlantic pinned to the wall above his typewriter. Small red pins marked the last known positions of ships that had gone missing that year. There were more pins than he liked to count. He began the way any curious man begins. He wrote letters to the Navy. He asked for the crew list. He asked for the cargo manifest. He asked about the weather. And the answers he got back were polite and thin and full of the soft, careful language men use when they do not know a thing but do not wish to admit it. The Navy told him the ship had been carrying manganese ore. The Navy told him she was overdue. The Navy told him that a search had been made and nothing had been found, and that was, for the moment, all they could say. He read those letters late into the night by the yellow light of a green-shaded lamp. He read them until the words felt smooth, like river stones, from being turned over so many times. He wanted more. So he did what reporters have always done when the official record goes quiet. He went to the docks. The Brooklyn waterfront in 1918 was a forest of masts and smokestacks and cranes. The air smelled of tar and salt and coal fires and rotting rope. Sailors sat on crates in the pale spring sun, mending nets, smoking clay pipes, watching the young man in the brown suit approach with something like tired amusement. They had seen his kind before. Reporters came looking for stories, the way children came looking for candy. He bought them beer at a low tavern with sawdust on the floor. He listened, and what the sailors told him was not what the Navy had told him. The sailors said the Cyclops had been sailing heavy, overloaded. They said her captain was a strange man, a German-born officer in an American Navy at war with Germany, and that made some men nervous and other men suspicious. They said the ship had cracked her frame once before. They said the sea south of Bermuda ate ships the way a barn cat ate mice. Without ceremony, without leaving much behind, he wrote it all down in a small leather notebook. He went back to his desk and typed through the night, and when his story ran, it did not answer the question of what had happened to the Cyclops. It only made the question louder. Other papers picked it up: the Baltimore Sun, the Washington Post, small papers in Ohio and Georgia that had never once cared about a Navy collier, now ran breathless columns about a ship swallowed by the sea. Each retelling added something: a storm that had not been there, a German submarine that had not been seen, a curse that had not been spoken. The story grew the way a snowball grows rolling down a hill, gathering everything in its path. The young reporter kept looking. He wrote to the families of the missing men. He got back letters, written in careful hands on cheap paper. Letters that told him about a son who loved his mother, a husband who had promised to come home for Christmas, a young officer who had just been married in the fall. Those letters he kept in a wooden box beneath his desk. He did not print them. Some things, he decided, were not for the papers. Years later, when he was an old man, he told a friend that the Cyclops story had followed him his whole life. He had chased it and never caught it. He said the sea had kept it secret, and the more he wrote, the more the secret seemed to grow, until it was bigger than the ship, bigger than the crew, bigger than the ocean itself. That, he said, was how a mystery is made, not by what is found, but by what the looking leaves behind. The afternoon of December 5th, 1945, was warm and clear over Fort Lauderdale. The sky was that soft Florida blue, the kind that looks painted on. 5 Navy training planes sat on the runway, their propellers ticking in the sun. The Avengers were heavy, stubby-nosed torpedo bombers, painted dark blue and marked with white stars. 14 young men climbed inside. The mission was routine: fly east, drop practice bombs on a small reef, turn north, then come home. 2 hours in the air, tops. The pilots had done this run before. The lead instructor was Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a veteran with over 2,000 flight hours. He knew these waters like the back of his hand. The other men were students, still learning, still nervous, the way young pilots always are. They laughed on the tarmac. They checked their watches. They lifted off just after 2 in the afternoon. 5 dark shapes climbing into that endless Florida blue. For the first hour, everything was ordinary. The planes reached the bombing target and dropped their practice loads over the sparkling water. Radio chatter was calm. The men joked about dinner back at base. Then, sometime after 3, something happened that nobody has ever explained. Taylor's voice came over the radio, and it was strange. He sounded confused. He told the tower his compasses were not working, both of them. He said he was over a chain of small islands, but did not recognize them. He thought somehow he was over the Florida Keys, but the Keys were hundreds of miles to the south. The math did not make sense. A senior flight instructor on the ground, a man named Robert Cox, picked up the transmissions. He tried to help. He told Taylor to fly with the sun on his left wing, to head west, to bring the flight home. Taylor kept flying, sometimes north, sometimes east, sometimes in circles. His voice on the radio grew tighter. The students behind him could be heard in the background, arguing softly, trying to reason with their leader. One student said, plain as day, that if they just flew west, they would hit land. They never flew west. As the sun dropped, the radio signals began to fade. The men in the tower listened to the static grow. They could still hear pieces of Taylor's voice, breaking up like a bad phone call. He spoke of white water below. He spoke of the ocean looking wrong. He said the sea did not look the way the sea should look. That is the phrase that survived, passed down through decades of retellings. The sea did not look the way the sea should look. A radio operator that night, a young enlisted man named Melvin Baker, later told friends he never forgot the sound of those voices. He said it was not panic. It was something quieter than panic. It was a slow drift, like men who had already accepted they were somewhere else. He said he stood in the tower with his hand on the receiver and felt the hair on his arms rise. He said the room got cold, even though the Florida night was warm. He said, years later, that the ocean took those boys and then closed the door behind them. Another witness that evening was a fisherman named Harold Cooper, working a small boat off the coast. He told a local paper he saw lights in the sky moving in patterns he could not follow. He said the lights went low, then bright, then vanished all at once, like someone had blown out a candle. He said he crossed himself and rode home fast. He would not go out again for a month. The tower kept calling, Flight 19, Flight 19, please respond. The static answered. A rescue plane, a Martin Mariner, lifted off with 13 men aboard to search for them. That plane also vanished, and we will get to that story soon. By midnight, 5 Avengers and 27 men were gone. The Navy searched for days. They found nothing. No oil slick, no floating seat cushion, no trace of metal or fuel or fabric. The Atlantic swallowed them whole. The official report, when it was finally written, blamed Taylor for getting lost. Then his family fought the finding, and the Navy quietly changed the course to reasons unknown. Reasons unknown, 2 words the ocean seems to specialize in. The men who listened to those radios that night carried the sound with them for the rest of their lives. They spoke of it softly, in kitchens, at reunions, to grandchildren who asked. They said the same thing, over and over. Something out there took them, and nobody knows what. The rescue plane was called a Martin Mariner. It was a big, boxy flying boat, painted the color of dull sea foam, with 2 propellers and a belly built to land right on the waves. The Navy kept these planes ready for emergencies, exactly like this one. When Flight 19 went missing, 2 mariners lifted off from the Banana River Naval Air Station in Florida. Their job was simple: find those 5 young pilots and bring them home. One of those mariners came back, the other did not. The plane that vanished carried 13 men. It rose into the evening sky at about 7:27. 23 minutes later, it was gone. No Mayday call, no distress signal, no wreckage floating on the dark Atlantic. Just an empty patch of sea where a large aircraft had been flying moments before. A passing tanker called the SS Gaines Mills reported seeing a burst of flame in the sky that same night. The captain wrote in his log that he saw a plane explode, then watched an oil slick spread across the water for miles. Most historians believe this was the missing mariner. These planes had a nickname among their crews. They called them flying gas tanks. Fuel fumes tended to build up inside the cabin. One spark from a cigarette or a bad switch, and the whole aircraft could go up like a torch. That is the sensible answer. That is the answer the Navy accepted. The storytellers wanted something else, because when you lined the pieces up, they began to hum in a strange harmony. 5 planes vanish. A 6th plane goes to find them. That 6th plane vanishes too. 19 men lost from the first flight. 13 more lost from the rescue. 32 Americans gone. In a single winter evening off the coast of a country that had just won a world war. The numbers had a rhythm. The pattern had a shape. And then people began remembering other things, older things, things that seemed disconnected, until you laid them side by side on a table under a warm lamp. The Cyclops, 306 men, vanished in 1918 without a single scrap of debris. The Carol Deering, a 5-masted schooner found on the shoals of North Carolina in 1921, sails still set, dinner still warm on the stove, the entire crew gone. The USS Pickering, a Navy brig, lost in a squall in 1800, 190 miles east of the Georgia coast, 90 men aboard, never found. The Rosalie, a French ship discovered drifting near Bermuda in 1840, cargo untouched, crew missing. None of these losses happened in the same decade. None of them shared a single sailor or captain or shipwright. The men who wrote the logs never met. The papers that printed the stories were separated by lifetimes. And yet the details kept rhyming, like verses of an old song passed from one singer to another. Ships found empty, planes gone quiet, compasses that spun, radios that hissed, weather that turned from clear to killing in the space of a breath. By the late 1940s, a certain kind of American reader began keeping a list. They cut articles out of the newspaper. They circled dates. They drew lines on maps between one loss and the next. And when they stepped back to look at their work, they saw a rough triangle taking shape in the water. Its corners touched Miami and Bermuda and San Juan. Inside that shape, the stories seemed to gather like leaves in a still pool. There is a competing view worth holding beside the pattern. Statisticians who later studied the region pointed out something quiet and stubborn. This was one of the busiest stretches of ocean on Earth. Millions of ships had passed through it. Countless planes had crossed it. If you sailed enough vessels through any patch of sea for long enough, you would collect a certain number of tragedies. The pattern was not the ocean speaking. The pattern was math. The believers had a different answer. They said the math missed the texture. They said the losses in the triangle had a particular flavor. Ships found intact, crews vanished cleanly. Wreckage that refused to appear. That texture, they argued, was not random, whether the shape in the water was real or imagined. One thing became certain in the years after Flight 19. A story was gathering itself in the American mind. It was pulling scattered losses toward a single center of gravity. It was giving the featureless Atlantic a name and a border and a personality. The rescue plane never came home, and in its absence, the legend found the room it needed to grow. The name did not come from a sailor. It did not come from a captain or an admiral or a man who had ever stood on the deck of a ship in a storm. The name came from a writer who worked in a small room at a small desk in the middle of the 20th century, chasing a paycheck one page at a time. His name was Vincent Gaddis. He wrote for magazines that cost a quarter and lived on newsstands next to the chewing gum. These were the Pulp magazines. They had bright covers and wild titles and stories about lost worlds and monsters and strange lights over the desert. Gaddis was good at his work. He knew how to hook a reader in the first paragraph and hold them through the last. In February of 1964, he wrote an article for a magazine called Sargasso. The magazine was thick and cheap and smelled of ink. On the cover, in bold letters, sat the title he had chosen, The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. That was the moment. That was the phrase. So for Gaddis, the missing ships and the missing planes belonged to no single place. They were scattered across the western Atlantic like beads on the floor. A tanker gone here, a Navy patrol lost there. Flight 19 vanished somewhere off the Florida coast. The stories existed, but they had no shape, they had no borders, they had no name. Gaddis gave them all free. He drew a rough triangle on a map. One point sat at Miami, at the southern tip of Florida. Another point sat at San Juan, on the island of Puerto Rico. The third point sat at the small island of Bermuda, alone in the open ocean. He connected the dots with 3 straight lines. Inside those lines, he placed every strange loss he could find. Outside those lines, he placed nothing. The map was simple, the idea was simple, and that was the trick. The human mind loves a shape. A shape makes chaos feel small. A shape makes the deep ocean feel like a room you could walk across. Gaddis had taken a huge, wild, restless stretch of sea and folded it into a neat piece of paper geometry. Now the mystery had corners. Now the mystery had edges. Now you could point to it. The article sold. The magazine flew off the shelves. Readers wrote letters. Other writers took notice. A year later, Gaddis expanded the article into a book called Invisible Horizons. The chapter about the triangle sat inside a longer collection of sea mysteries. But that chapter was the one people remembered. That chapter was the one people copied. Within a few years, other writers were building on his work, borrowing his triangle, sharpening his phrases, stretching his boundaries until the shape covered nearly 1 million square miles of ocean. What is strange is how loose the lines really were. Some writers pulled the western corner up toward Norfolk, Virginia. Others pushed the eastern corner past the Azores. A few drew a wider shape and called it the Devil's Triangle. Others narrowed it back down. Every writer moved the walls to fit the stories they wanted to tell. A ship lost near the Bahamas went in. A ship lost near the same waters, but on the wrong side of an invisible line, was quietly left out. That flexibility should have been a clue. A real geographic mystery has fixed borders. A real dead zone in the ocean does not shift its shape depending on the author. But readers did not care about that. Readers cared about the feeling, and the feeling was strong. Gaddis wrote in a warm, sure voice. He described the sea with color and weight. He made you smell the salt and feel the sun on the deck of a lost freighter. He was, after all, a pulp writer. He knew how to make you see. Skeptics later called his work a kind of sleight of hand. I said he had gathered old accidents from a wide area, ignored the ones that did not fit, and pulled the survivors into a tidy pattern that never really existed. They pointed out that the Western Atlantic is one of the busiest shipping regions on Earth. More ships means more losses. Simple math. Believers pushed back. They said Gaddis had noticed something the shipping companies had ignored. They said the pattern was real, even if the borders were fuzzy. They said a good storyteller sometimes sees the truth before the numbers do. Both sides still argue. And the triangle Gaddis drew on that magazine page, in that small room, at that small desk, still sits on the map of the American imagination, one quiet corner of ocean, given a name it never asked for. By the time the triangle became a household word, America was already living inside another story. A story about things hidden under the surface. Submarines in the deep, missiles in silos beneath the wheat, enemies you could not see, moving through water and shadow, always somewhere just past the edge of what you could know. The 1950s and 1960s pressed down on the country like a wet wool blanket. Air raid drills in schoolrooms with green chalkboards, fallout shelter signs bolted to the walls of post offices, their yellow and black triangles glowing under fluorescent light. Families sat around wooden television sets, watching men in dark suits speak about the bomb. The sea, which had always been a place of trade and travel, became something else. It became a hiding place, a place where secret metal machines slid through the dark, listening for each other. And into that mood, into that quiet dread, the Bermuda Triangle grew. Here is the detail that shouldn't fit, the detail that people still turn over in their hands like a smooth stone. In April of 1963, a nuclear submarine called the Thresher slipped below the surface off the coast of New England. She was the pride of the fleet. Her hull was black and long and streamlined, built to dive deeper than any submarine before her. On board were 129 men. Sailors, officers, civilian engineers in coveralls, holding clipboards. They were running a test dive. She never came back up. The Thresher went down far north of what anyone would call the Triangle. Her wreckage was found scattered across the seafloor in 6 pieces, crushed by pressure into shapes no human hand could straighten. But something strange happened in the years after. The story of the Thresher began to drift south on the current of American memory. In magazines, in paperback books with lurid covers, in late-night radio shows crackling through car speakers on empty highways. Writers started listing her among the Triangle's victims. The map stretched to include her. The boundaries moved, the way fog moves, quiet and without asking permission. Then came the Scorpion, another nuclear submarine. May of 1968, she was returning from a mission in the Mediterranean, sailing home to Norfolk, Virginia. 99 men aboard. Somewhere out in the deep Atlantic, roughly 400 miles southwest of the Azores, she went silent. When the Navy finally found her, months later, she lay 2 miles down, broken open on the abyssal plain. The Scorpion, too, was hundreds of miles from the Triangle's supposed edge, and she, too, began to migrate. Writers pulled her into the story. Talk show hosts mentioned her name in the same breath as Flight 19. The Triangle, which had been sketched on a magazine page by a pulp writer only 4 years earlier, was already growing arms and legs. It was reaching out and pulling in ships and planes and submarines that had been lost somewhere else entirely. That is the impossible detail. Not that the submarines vanished. Submarines are fragile things, thin skins of steel holding back an ocean that wants to crush them. What is impossible is how easily the Triangle absorbed them, how a story could stretch 1,000 miles in any direction, and nobody seemed to notice. How Americans, sitting in their living rooms with the television flickering blue against the wallpaper, simply nodded and made room for another ghost. The country needed a place to put its fear. That is the quiet truth beneath it all. The Cold War had filled the ocean with secrets no citizen could ever learn. Real submarines were doing real things in real darkness, and none of it could be spoken of on the evening news. When the Thresher went down, the Navy released almost nothing. When the Scorpion was lost, the details stayed classified for decades. The public was told a shape of a story, and the rest was grey water. So the triangle grew to fill the space. It became the container for everything the ocean would not explain. Every loss, every silence, every unanswered radio call. If you could not know what the Navy knew, you could at least believe in something. A patch of warm blue water where the rules bent. A place with a name and a shape you could point to on a map. The strangeness is not the disappearances themselves. Ships and planes and submarines have always been lost at sea. The strangeness is how a story, once it is told well enough, can pull the whole ocean toward it, can pull the Cold War toward it, can pull the fear of a whole country toward it, and hold that fear gently, like a bowl holding water. The triangle was never just a triangle. It was a room where America kept the things it could not say out loud. In the summer of 1974, a paperback landed on drugstore spinner racks across the country. The cover showed a ghostly ship swallowed by dark water. The title was simple, The Bermuda Triangle. The author was a man named Charles Berlitz. Berlitz came from the family that ran the famous language schools. He had money, a good name, and a hunger for the strange. He had already written about lost civilizations and vanished continents. Now he turned his pen to the warm patch of ocean off the Florida coast. The book sold nearly 20 million copies. It was translated into 30 languages. It sat on nightstands and coffee tables from Maine to California. Its pages soft from thumbing. Berlitz gathered every story he could find. Flight 19, the Cyclops, small planes that vanished on clear afternoons, yachts found drifting with breakfast still warm on the stove. He wrote it all down in a calm, matter-of-fact voice, as if he were reading the weather report. That calm voice was the trick. It made the impossible sound like a filed record. Not everyone believed him. A librarian in Arizona named Larry Cush read the book and grew curious. He worked at Arizona State University. He had access to old newspapers, Weather Bureau logs, insurance filings, and Coast Guard reports. He decided to check Berlitz's stories one by one. What he found became a book of its own. The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, published in 1975. Cush was polite. He did not shout. He simply laid the paperwork on the table. The yacht found with breakfast still warm. Cush traced the record. The weather that day had been rough, not calm. The stove had been cold. The story had grown warmer with each retelling. A ship, Berlitz had vanished in the triangle, had actually sunk hundreds of miles away in the Pacific. A plane that disappeared without warning had in fact radioed a mayday during a violent storm. Detail after detail came apart in Cush's careful hands like wet paper. He was not cruel about it. He seemed almost sad. He wrote that the legend had grown by a slow game of telephone. Each writer trusted the writer before him. Nobody went back to the shipping logs. Nobody called the widow. Nobody checked the weather for that afternoon in that year. The mystery, Cush said, was a mystery of sloppy sources. The Coast Guard agreed. They released a plain statement. The triangle showed no unusual loss rate compared to other busy stretches of ocean. Lloyd's of London, the great insurance house in England, ran their own numbers. They charged no extra premium for ships crossing the triangle. To them, it was just water. The skeptics had good reasons. They had documents. They had weather charts. They had the dry logic of columns and dates. They pointed out that the ocean is enormous, that ships sink, that planes crash, that the Gulf Stream sweeps wreckage away in a single night. They noted that the triangle's borders shifted from book to book, expanding to swallow any new loss that came along. Draw the shape wide enough, and you can catch anything. For a while, it seemed the mystery was over. The magazines moved on. The paperback grew dusty on shelves in used bookstores. And yet, something in the story refused to lie down. Even Couchet admitted there were cases he could not fully explain. Small planes on clear days, gone without a mayday, without a slick of oil, without a scrap of aluminum floating on the swell. Flight 19 remained a puzzle at its edges, no matter how carefully you read the transcripts. The Cyclops still slept somewhere below, 300 souls in her belly, and no one knew where. The skeptics could explain most of it. Most is not all, and it was in that small gap, that thin margin of the unexplained, that the legend kept breathing. You can see it in Cush's own writing. He never claimed to have solved every case. He solved the easy ones and admitted the hard ones. That is honest work. But honest work leaves loose threads, and folklore loves a loose thread. Berlitz kept writing new books, new mysteries, new maps with dotted lines. He never answered Couchet in detail. He did not need to. The public had already chosen the version of the ocean it wanted to believe. Numbers on a page could not compete with a warm night, a soft lamp, and a story about a plane that flew into a cloud and never came out. The skeptics won the argument. The legend won the country. Both of those things, somehow, are true at the same time. Off the coast of Bimini, in the shallow blue water of the Bahamas, there is a road, or something that looks like a road. It rests about 18 feet below the surface, a long line of flat stones laid end to end, like paving blocks in some forgotten courtyard. The stones are pale, worn soft by centuries of tide. Sea fans grow between them. Small silver fish drift over them like leaves over a sidewalk. Divers found it in 1968. A pilot named Robert Brush spotted the shape from the air, and soon after, a zoologist named J. Manson Valentine swam down to see it for himself. He surfaced, with his eyes wide and his voice steady. He said he had seen the edge of a lost city. The place is called the Bimini Road now. Some call it the Bimini Wall. It runs for about half a mile in a gentle J shape through the pale sand, and if you float above it in a mask and fins, you can trace its path like a sentence written in stone. The blocks are big. Some are 10 feet across. They fit together the way old cobblestones fit, corner to corner, with narrow seams between. Geologists came. They took samples. They said the stones were natural, a kind of beach rock that fractures into rectangles when it dries and cracks. They said the ocean makes shapes like this all the time. The believers listened, nodded, and went right on believing, because the believers had a name for what they had found. They called it Atlantis, and they had a prophecy to back them up, decades before the divers ever went down. A sleeping man in Virginia had spoken about this exact spot. His name was Edgar Casey. He was a photographer with a gentle voice and a strange gift, or so the story goes. He would lie down on a couch, close his eyes, and speak in a slow, steady murmur about places he had never been. In 1938, from that couch, he said that a portion of Atlantis would rise again near Bimini. He said it would happen in 1968 or 1969. The road appeared in 1968. You can imagine what that did to the believers. A prophecy spoken 30 years before the discovery, naming the year and the island. To them, the coincidence was too clean to be a coincidence. The pale stones under the warm water were proof of everything, proof that the old civilizations were real, proof that the sea had swallowed something magnificent, proof that the strange losses in the triangle above them were not random weather, but the last breath of a drowned world, still humming beneath the waves. The people who dove that road came back changed. Dr. Valentine kept going back for the rest of his life. He mapped the stones, he drew them in careful pencil. He wrote papers that mainstream journals would not print, and he kept writing them anyway. He was a serious scientist with a serious career, and he spent his later years being politely dismissed by people who had never gotten wet. It cost him. Colleagues stopped inviting him to conferences. His name became a small joke in certain rooms. He did not seem to mind. In interviews, he spoke the way a man speaks about a marriage, quietly. With a small, private smile, he said he knew what he had seen. Others followed him down. A researcher named Dr. Greg Little brought sonar and cameras. He found what he described as a second layer of stones beneath the first, and possible post holes carved into the rock. Skeptics reviewed his findings and said the second layer was more beach rock, the post holes just erosion. Little kept diving. He wrote books. He gave talks in small hotel ballrooms to audiences who leaned forward when he spoke. The believers were never loud people. That is the strange thing about them. They were not shouting on street corners. They were quiet men and women with tanned skin and salt in their hair, who had seen something in the water and could not unsee it. They did not need the world to agree. They needed only to keep going back, keep looking, keep tracing the seams between the stones with their gloved fingers. Whether the Bimini Road is a natural wonder or a broken street from a drowned city, no one can say for certain. The geologists have their answer. The believers have theirs. The stones themselves lie quiet under the blue water, warmed by the sun, cooled by the current, patient as they have been for whoever laid them, if anyone laid them at all. And above them, in the pale bright sky, planes still cross the triangle, and sometimes one of them does not come back. Come back to the water for a moment. Not the maps, not the writers, not the pulp magazines with their bright covers, the water itself. Because if any part of this story remembers what happened, it is the sea. And the sea has a strange stretch of itself that sailors have feared since before America had a name. They call it the Sargasso. It sits in the middle of the North Atlantic, a slow oval of warm water, held in place by ocean currents that turn like a lazy wheel. The Gulf Stream forms its western edge. Other currents shape the north, the east, the south. Inside that ring, the water barely moves. It just sits there, deep and blue and warm, cradling a mat of golden weed that floats on the surface in long ribbons. The weed is called sargassum. It grows in tangled rafts, some the size of a dinner plate, some the size of a small town. From the deck of a ship, it looks like a meadow that shouldn't exist, golden grass on a blue field. Little crabs cling to it, small fish dart underneath, sea turtles sleep in it, like tired children in tall hay. The whole place smells faintly of salt and iodine, and something older, something like a garden left too long in the sun. Columbus sailed through it in 1492 and thought he was near land. His men saw the weed and grew hopeful. They reached down and pulled up handfuls of it, looking for shells, looking for signs of a nearby shore. There was no shore. The weed stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, floating on water that was 2 miles deep. The sailors did not like it. A meadow that grows on nothing is not a comforting thing. Over the centuries, the Sargasso became the setting for one of the ocean's oldest ghost stories. Sailors said ships got caught in the weed and could not move. They said the wind died there and stayed dead. They said crews starved on becalmed decks while the golden grass reached up and held the hull like soft fingers. Old maps sometimes marked the region with drawings of tangled ships, mast against mast, drifting forever in a slow blue circle. Most of that was exaggeration. The weed cannot really hold a ship. The wind does die there sometimes, because the middle of that spinning current is a quiet place. But it also picks up again. Still, the story stuck, and the stories fed the triangle, because part of the Bermuda Triangle, the eastern part, brushes right up against the edge of the Sargasso Sea. The two legends bleed into each other like watercolors on wet paper. The Gulf Stream itself is another kind of memory. It runs along the western edge, a river inside the ocean, warm and fast and dark blue against the paler water around it. You can see the line where it begins if you fly over it on a clear day. The water changes color as if someone drew a boundary with a brush. That current moves at 4 or 5 miles an hour in places. It carries anything that falls into it: wreckage, oil slicks, life rafts, bodies, and pulls them north and east at a pace no search party can easily predict. A plane that goes down at noon might have its debris scattered 80 miles away by sunset. A lifeboat set adrift on Tuesday might be halfway to the Carolinas by Friday. The Gulf Stream is not haunted. It is just a river that will not stop. But when a ship disappears in this region and nothing is ever found, the current is often the reason. The evidence gets carried off before anyone can look for it. The landscape holds other quiet clues. The sea floor here drops fast. Close to Bermuda, the bottom falls away to depths of 15,000 feet. Off the Bahamas, there are trenches deeper still. When something sinks, it sinks a long way down into cold, dark water where the pressure would crush a submarine. Divers do not go there. Cameras rarely go there. Whatever settles on that bottom stays on that bottom, unseen, unrecovered, a private matter. Between the wreck and the mud, nature does not lie. The Sargasso really is strange. The Gulf Stream really does hide the evidence. The trenches really do swallow ships whole. None of that is magic, but when you put those three things together in one warm oval of ocean, you start to see why the legend grew here and not somewhere else. The place gave the story roots. The weed and the current and the deep did the rest. Somewhere in the late 1990s, a scientist stood at a chalkboard in a quiet university office and tried to explain the Bermuda Triangle with chemistry. His name was Ben Clennell. He was a geologist, not a storyteller. But the theory he helped shape became one of the strangest ideas ever attached to a legend, and it traveled far beyond the warm water off Florida. The idea was simple enough. Deep beneath the seafloor, in cold pockets of mud and sand, there sit vast stores of frozen methane. Scientists call these deposits methane hydrates. They look a little like dirty ice, packed tight under pressure and temperature that keep them stable. When something disturbs that balance, the ice melts and the gas rushes upward in enormous bubbles. Here is where the theory gets interesting to the storytellers. A ship floats because the water beneath it is dense enough to hold its weight. But water full of gas is not really water at all. It is froth. It has no lift. If a ship happens to be sailing across the surface when a giant methane bubble rises, the sea beneath the hull could turn to foam in seconds. the ship would drop like a stone into a hole made of nothing. Some researchers took the idea further. They suggested that the same gas, rising into the air above the waves, could choke an airplane's engine or throw off its instruments. A pilot flying through an invisible cloud of methane might lose power without warning. His radio might crackle, his compass might spin, and the plane, like the ship below, would slip into a sea that had briefly forgotten how to hold anything up. For a while, the methane bubble theory looked like the answer everyone had been waiting for. It was strange enough to feel worthy of the legend, but grounded enough to sound like real science. Documentaries loved it. Magazines printed diagrams with arrows and cutaway drawings of the ocean floor. The frozen ice down in the dark suddenly had a starring role in a mystery that had puzzled America for decades. Then the pushback came. Other scientists looked at the maps and pointed out an awkward fact. The known methane hydrate deposits in the western Atlantic sit far from the busy shipping lanes where most of the vanishings happened. The big fields lie north, along the continental shelf off the Carolinas, not in the warm blue water south of Bermuda. To blame methane for the Cyclops or Flight 19, you would have to move the gas to where the stories are, not point to where the gas actually is. There was another problem too. No one has ever documented a ship lost to a methane eruption in modern times. Not one. Researchers have studied ancient pockmarks on the seafloor, huge round scars that suggest gas blowouts happened thousands of years ago. But those were rare events, spaced across enormous stretches of time. The odds of a ship happening to sail directly over one at the exact moment it fired seemed almost impossible. Still, the theory refused to die, and that is the pattern worth noticing. Because this same story, with different names and different oceans, keeps repeating itself across American folklore up in the Great Lakes. Sailors tell of the Witch of November, a wind that swallows freighters whole. Scientists blame cold fronts and steep waves. Believers blame something older. Off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, boats vanish near the Devil's Hole, where the currents twist and the fog sits thick as wet wool. In the Alaskan Triangle, planes disappear into snow so white it erases the horizon, and hunters whisper about creatures that walk the tree line. Each of these places has its own version of the methane bubble, a scientific answer that sounds almost too clever, a theory that half explains the vanishings and leaves just enough mystery for the campfire. In every case, the researchers arrive with their charts and their measurements, and the storytellers arrive with their memories, and the two sides never quite agree. The truth is that America has always needed places on the map where the rules bend a little. The Bermuda Triangle just happens to be the most famous. 1. The methane theory, whether right or wrong, is part of a longer tradition of trying to name what the sea refuses to explain. It offers a bridge between the world of instruments and the world of legends, and it lets both sides keep talking. Whether they ever swallowed a single ship remains one of those questions the warm water keeps to itself, along with all the others it has already refused to answer. For a long time, sailors spoke of walls of water that rose up from a calm sea and swallowed ships whole. Old salts told these stories in port taverns. Younger men laughed and rolled their eyes. Scientists shook their heads and called it exaggeration. A wave that tall, they said, could not exist. The math would not allow it. Then, one night, in the winter of 1995, a metal tower in the North Sea recorded something strange. The tower was called Draupner. It sat on steel legs above the cold grey water off the coast of Norway. A laser instrument on its underside measured the height of every wave that passed beneath it. On New Year's Day, it caught a monster. The wave was nearly 85 feet tall. It rose out of a sea where the other waves were only 40 feet. It came without warning, hit the platform, and rolled on into the dark. The instrument printed out a clean, sharp record, ink on paper, a number no one could argue with. The old sailors, it turned out, had been telling the truth all along. That single printout changed the way scientists thought about the ocean. If rogue waves were real in the North Sea, they were real everywhere. They were real in the warm blue water between Miami and Bermuda too. Ships that vanished on calm afternoons might not have vanished at all, in the way the legend claimed. They might have been hit by a wall of water taller than a 6-story building, and then dragged under so fast that no radio call could get out. You can still see photographs of the damage rogue waves leave behind. Freighters coming into port with their bows peeled back, like tin cans. Cruise ships with windows smashed in on the 8th deck, bridge glass shattered 100 feet above the waterline. These are not stories. These are pictures you can hold in your hand. Steel bent like foil, paint scraped clean by the weight of the water. Weather itself leaves artifacts too. In the archives of the National Hurricane Center in Miami, there are yellowing paper maps that show storms nobody remembered until years later. Small squalls that formed in the afternoon and died by sundown. Local downbursts that hit 1 square mile of ocean with winds of 90 miles an hour, and then were gone before any weather station could log them. Pilots call these microbursts. They punch straight down out of a summer cloud like a fist. For a small plane flying low over the sea, a microburst is a death sentence. The plane simply falls. There is no time to radio. There is no wreckage that floats. The warm water closes over the aluminum, and the Gulf Stream carries the pieces east toward Africa, spread out over 100 miles of open ocean. By the time anyone thinks to look, old logbooks tell the same story in another handwriting. In the yellowed pages of merchant captains' journals, kept in museums in Norfolk and Nantucket, you can read entries about sudden squalls, freak seas, glass barometers that dropped a full inch in 10 minutes. One captain, in 1892, wrote of a wave that came out of nowhere on a bright afternoon and knocked his ship on her side. He said the sea was flat after. He could not explain where it came from. He wrote the entry in a slow, careful hand, as if he wanted to be believed. There are photographs too, taken from the decks of Coast Guard cutters, that show the sea in the triangle behaving in ways it should not. Slick patches of water, sitting next to choppy ones, divided by a line as sharp as a knife's edge. That line is the edge of the Gulf Stream, where warm water pushes north against cooler water and creates currents that can spin a small boat like a leaf. In some of the pictures, you can see steam rising off the warm side in the winter, ghostly and pale, drifting off toward Bermuda. None of these artifacts prove magic. They prove something quieter, and in some ways, stranger. They prove that the sea in this part of the world is genuinely wild. It hides its weather. It builds waves out of thin air. It swallows things whole and never gives them back. The mystery, then, is not whether ships vanish here. They do. The mystery is why we needed the triangle at all, when the ordinary ocean was already so full of impossible things. The warm water keeps its secrets either way, and the paper records, sitting in their grey archive boxes, only deepen the quiet. Every family that spent time on the water down there has a story. You'll hear them at Thanksgiving tables in Miami, at fish fries in Norfolk, at cookouts in Nassau, where the coals burn down to grey ash, and the older folks lean back in plastic chairs. Somebody mentions the ocean. Somebody else mentions a grandfather. And then the story comes out, told again for the 100th time. Worn smooth as a beach stone, the lights are always at the center of it. A grandfather on a shrimp boat off Key West in the 1950s, running his nets in a dark that felt heavier than usual. He looked up and saw a green glow moving under the hull, not a reflection, not a school of phosphorescent fish, something wide and steady, keeping pace with the boat, cool as a lamp behind frosted glass. He watched it for maybe 2 minutes. Then it slid away toward deeper water, and the sea turned black again. That story gets told at every family gathering. His son tells it now. His grandson tells a slightly different version. Somewhere along the way, the 2 minutes became 5, and the color shifted from green to blue-green, and the grandfather started saying he felt the boat lift a little, as if the water beneath him had grown thick. The bones of the tale stay the same. The details change with each mouth that carries them. You hear the same shape of story from Bahamian fishermen whose great-grandfathers worked the sponge beds. Lights under the water. Lights above it. A ring of pale fire circling a mast at 3 in the morning, while the wind held its breath. Sailors have a name for that ring. They call it St. Elmo's fire, and science can explain it as a discharge from the air itself, a slow burn of electricity along tall metal in a charged sky. But the men who saw it didn't care about the explanation. They cared that they had seen it, and that their fathers had seen it, and that the ocean out past Bimini kept doing the same trick century after century. The Navy pilots who flew the coast in the 60s and 70s carried their own versions home. A father tells his daughter, 40 years later, about a night flight from Jacksonville. He was following a routine track over the water, and off his left wing, a soft white light kept steady beside him for 11 minutes. It made no sound, it cast no beam. When he banked to look at it directly, it slid backward and disappeared into a low bank of cloud. He never reported it. He said reporting it would have ended his career. But he told his daughter, and she told her son, and now the son tells it at Christmas with the same quiet respect his grandfather used. These are the family stories. They almost never make it into books. They almost never appear in the big paperback collections that lined the shelves in the 70s. They live at kitchen tables, in the small warm circle of people who trust each other enough not to laugh. And in those circles, the triangle is not a marketing idea or a magazine legend. It's a piece of the family, the same way a lost uncle or a burned down house becomes part of the family. The polish is real. Each generation smooths the tale. The details that sound too wild get dropped. The ones that sound too dull get quietly upgraded. What survives is the version that feels true when spoken aloud on a summer porch with the cicadas going, the green light, the steady pace, the way the grandfather never quite explained it, only shook his head and looked out at the water like it still owed him an answer. The skeptic would say these stories are exactly what you'd expect. People see strange things at sea because the sea is strange. Bioluminescence blooms in patches. Electric storms play tricks on tall masts. Tired pilots misjudge distant satellites, and running lights on other aircraft. Multiply that by 100 years of Atlantic traffic, and you'll harvest a bushel of unexplained lights without ever needing a mystery. The believer would say the skeptic has never sat at that table, has never watched a grandmother close her eyes and describe a color she saw once in 1961, has never felt the room go quiet when the story reaches its final beat. The lights are not proof of anything. They are only what the family remembers, and in the space between what happened and what got told, the triangle keeps its shape, passed down like a recipe, like a song, like the name of an ancestor nobody living ever met. The ocean keeps its version, the families keep theirs. By the time the 70s rolled into the 80s, the Bermuda Triangle had left the pages of pulp books and moved somewhere else entirely. It moved into living rooms, it moved into the blue glow of television sets humming at midnight. When the good shows were done and the strange shows began, you could sit on a couch in Ohio or Nebraska, 1,000 miles from the nearest salt water, and watch grainy documentaries about a patch of ocean you would never see. The narrators had deep voices, the music swelled like waves, and the theories by then had grown wings. Aliens came first, not the small grey ones from later decades, but tall shining figures with saucers that hovered above the warm blue water. Writers claimed the triangle was a landing zone, a gateway, a place where beings from other worlds collected human ships the way a child collects marbles. The idea sounded absurd in daylight. At 2 a.m, with the wind pushing at the windows, it sounded almost reasonable. Then came Atlantis, the lost city, sunk beneath the Atlantic in some forgotten age, was said to still hum with power under the waves near Bimini. Its crystals, some said, sent out beams that scrambled compasses and pulled planes down from the sky. There were books about it. There were paperbacks with gold letters and painted covers showing broken columns under green water. People bought them by the millions. There were stranger ideas still. Time portals opening in the fog, underwater bases run by secret governments, doorways to other dimensions where lost sailors still wandered, thinking only an hour had passed while decades slipped by above. Each theory competed for attention like a barker at a carnival, each one louder than the last. And here is the quiet truth underneath all of it. None of these theories really needed to be proven. They were not scientific claims. They were stories a country was telling itself in the small hours of the night, when the workday was done and the mind wanted somewhere else to go. The triangle had stopped being a place on a map. It had become a kind of shared dream, passed around the country through cheap paperbacks and syndicated specials and radio shows that ran until dawn. Think of the people who watched those late-night programs. A truck driver in a motel outside Amarillo, boots off, television flickering, a nurse on the graveyard shift in a Cleveland hospital, catching 10 minutes between rounds, a teenager in Miami with the sound turned low so the parents would not wake, all of them tuning in to hear about aliens and Atlantis and vanished planes, all of them, in that moment, sharing something. The triangle gave them a place to put the feeling that the world was bigger than the world they knew, that behind the ordinary shape of things, there was something waiting, something old, something with its own reasons. The scholars could argue about statistics all they wanted. The Coast Guard could publish reports. The insurance companies could point to their records and say the loss rate was ordinary, that ships sink everywhere, that planes go down in every ocean. All of that was true, and none of it mattered, because the triangle was never really about the numbers. It was about the ache to believe that magic still lived somewhere on the map, that not every corner of the world had been photographed and measured and drained of wonder, that out there, past the beach chairs and the cruise ships and the postcards, there was still one small square of ocean where the old rules did not apply, where a compass might swing wild, where a plane might fly into a cloud and never come out, where the sea kept its secrets the way seas were supposed to. That ache belonged to America in a specific way, a country young enough to still be inventing its own folklore, a country that had paved most of its wilderness and lit up most of its dark corners. It needed a place, somewhere, that stayed unknown, and the warm blue water off the coast of Florida was willing to hold that role. The late-night television knew this. The paperback writers knew this. The narrators with the deep voices knew this. They were not lying exactly. They were feeding a hunger, and the hunger fed them back. So the theories piled up, aliens and lost cities, and time slips and crystal beams, each one a candle set out on the dark water, each one flickering, each one keeping the mystery alive. One more night for one more listener, staring at the ceiling, imagining the sea. Stand with me for a moment on the deck of a small boat, somewhere off the coast of Florida, on a warm night in the middle of nowhere. The engine is off, the lights are low, the water around you is black and glossy, like a sheet of old glass laid flat over something you cannot see. Above you, the sky is thick with stars, more stars than a person from the city ever knows exist. This is the ocean the stories are about. This is the water that swallowed Flight 19, and the Cyclops and 100 smaller boats no one remembers by name. And tonight it is quiet. It is so quiet you can hear the soft slap of a wave against the hull, and the tiny creak of a rope moving in its cleat, and the faraway hum of some other engine, miles off, running lights, blinking red and green in the dark. The Coast Guard knows this water better than anyone. They patrol it every night, they fly over it in helicopters and search it in cutters and answer distress calls from sailors who took the wrong current or the wrong storm. And what they find when they come home in the morning is almost never a mystery. They find broken hulls. They find drifting life jackets. They find engine oil rising in slow rainbow slicks on the surface of the sea. Sometimes they find people, cold and tired and grateful. Sometimes they find nothing at all, and they mark the position on a chart, and they turn back toward shore. The Coast Guard has said for many years that the Bermuda Triangle is not a special place to them. They do not keep separate records for it. They do not treat it as haunted. They treat it as ocean, big, wide, moody ocean, with weather that turns fast, and a floor that drops off into canyons deeper than mountains are tall. Ships go down here for the same reasons ships go down anywhere. Storms, bad maps, old engines, tired captains. A wave that comes in from the wrong side at the wrong moment. Standing on the deck now, you can almost believe them. The water looks so calm. The stars look so patient. There is no menace in any of it. There is only the enormous, patient dark breathing slow beneath your feet. Above you, the Milky Way spills across the sky like milk poured onto black stone. You can see the arm of the galaxy, faint and dusty, curving from one horizon to the other. Satellites move across it in straight, quiet lines. A shooting star draws a short white scratch above the mast and is gone before you can point at it. The air smells like salt and warm wood. The deck is still holding the heat of the afternoon sun. Somewhere far away, a fish jumps and lands with a small applause of water. And then the silence closes again, like a door. Down below, in the cabin, a radio hisses softly. It is tuned to the Coast Guard channel, out of habit, the way some people leave a kitchen light on. Every once in a while, a voice comes through, calm, bored almost, reporting a position, confirming a course, wishing another vessel a good night. This is the real sound of the Bermuda Triangle, not screams, not static swallowing pilots, just tired men and women doing their jobs in the dark. The Coast Guard has found, over the years, that most ships that vanish here were not ready for what the sea can do. Overloaded boats, old boats, boats with one radio and no backup. Boats that left port when the forecast said stay home. And when the wind came and the wave came, they went under fast, faster than anyone could call, faster than anyone could think. The ocean does not need magic to take a boat. It only needs a little time and a little bad luck. You look out at the horizon. You cannot tell where the water ends and the sky begins. The stars go all the way down to the surface and keep going, reflected, doubled, as if you were floating in the middle of a great sphere of light. You feel very small. You feel very safe. Smallness out here is a comfort. It reminds you that the world is bigger than your worries, and older than your fears, and stranger than any story you have been told. Somewhere south of you, the Coast Guard is on patrol. Somewhere north, a freighter is heading for port, and under all of it, the warm, dark water keeps its own long, slow counsel, and it does not care what anyone calls it. The story never really ended. That is the strange gift the Triangle gave to America, long after the paperbacks yellowed on garage sale tables. Long after the television specials moved on to other mysteries, the sea kept doing what the sea has always done. Small planes still slip off the radar somewhere between Florida and the Bahamas. Fishing boats still fail to come home. And every time it happens, the old name rises up again, like a bubble surfacing from deep water. You can watch this happen in real time now. A single-engine plane leaves a small airport in central Florida on a bright afternoon. The pilot files a route towards Bimini or Great Exuma, or one of the low green islands scattered across that pale blue shelf. Somewhere over the warm water, the little dot on the flight tracker blinks once and disappears. Within hours, the story has moved from local news to national feeds, and the words appear again in the headlines, printed in that familiar bold type: Bermuda Triangle. Missing, mystery. The Coast Guard runs its searches the way it always has. Big grey planes cut long, lazy patterns across the swells. Cutters trace grids through the current. Sometimes they find a slick of fuel or a floating cushion. Sometimes they find nothing at all. The warm blue skin of the water closes over whatever happened, smooth as poured glass, and the search is called off after a few days. The families gather in small living rooms far inland, holding photographs, waiting for a phone call that will not come. This is the legacy, not the old ships or the wartime bombers. The living, breathing continuation of the legend, one small plane at a time. Something curious grew from all this in the towns that ring the Triangle's edge. Down in Fort Lauderdale, at the Naval Air Station Museum, you can walk into a quiet room and see the story of Flight 19 laid out under glass. Faded photographs of 5 young pilots, a model of the Avenger torpedo bomber, its wings stubby and stout. Visitors stand in front of the display and go silent, the way people go silent in old churches. In Bermuda itself, gift shops sell tiny wooden triangles with the corners marked in gold. In the Bahamas, dive boats run tours to the underwater rock formations off Bimini, and the guides tell the Atlantis story with a wink that is only half a wink. The whole thing became a small economy. Books, films, cruises, t-shirts with cartoon ships getting sucked into whirlpools. A certain kind of Florida bar keeps a framed newspaper clipping behind the counter about some vanished shrimper from the 70s. The bartender will pour you a drink and tell you the story if you ask, and the story will grow a little longer each time it is told. People who live along that coast carry the legend differently than the rest of the country does. They know the water. They have felt the way a squall can build in 20 minutes out of a clear sky. They have seen the compass on a small boat swing lazy circles for reasons nobody can explain. They know that the Gulf Stream runs like a great blue river inside the ocean, carrying whatever falls into it toward the north, at 4 knots, faster than a man can swim. To them, the mystery is not really a mystery. It is just the sea being the sea, wearing the costume of a legend, so that outsiders will pay attention. Still, even the old salts who scoff at the triangle will sometimes glance up at a strange sky and say nothing for a long moment. There is a kind of double vision that comes from living in a place a legend has claimed. You know the truth of the weather and the currents and the tired pilots pushing on too far. You also know the stories your grandfather told about lights on the horizon that had no business being there. And so the legacy keeps writing itself. Every few months, a small plane vanishes and the old name comes back. Every few years, a sailboat is found empty, drifting with sails still trim, and someone reaches for the word Marie Celeste, even though that ship sank in a different ocean entirely. The triangle absorbs it all. It has become a container into which America pours its ongoing losses at sea, giving them a shape and a home. The mystery survives because the sea keeps feeding it, not with ancient wrecks or wartime squadrons, with the ordinary heartbreak of small aircraft and small boats disappearing into that wide, warm blue, one at a time, quietly, the way they always have. There is a story that follows a man named Arlen Priddy, though most who tell it now have forgotten his first name. He was born on a small island south of Miami in the late 1920s. His father ran cargo runs between the Florida Keys and Nassau, hauling flour and rope and mail across water, so blue it looked painted. Arlen grew up smelling salt and diesel. He grew up listening to men at the docks talk about ships that never came back. When Arlen was 17, his father sailed out on a clear Tuesday morning and never returned. No storm, no wreckage, just a boat that left port and did not come home. The Coast Guard searched for 6 days. They found a wooden crate and half a life preserver and nothing else. Arlen's mother packed their small house into 2 suitcases and moved them north to a farm town in Ohio, as far from the ocean as her sister's spare bedroom could carry them. But Arlen took the sea with him. He kept his father's compass in his shirt pocket, though the needle sometimes spun for no reason he could name. He kept a folded chart of the Bahamas under his mattress. And most of all, he kept the story. In Ohio, Arlen worked at a feed store and later at a small radio repair shop on the edge of a town of maybe 2,000 people. The land there was flat and green, cut by slow brown rivers and long straight roads that ran between fields of corn. In winter, the sky turned the color of old tin. In summer, the air smelled like cut hay and diesel from the tractors. It was a place so far from the ocean that most of his neighbors had never seen salt water. And yet, every evening, Arlen told the story. He told it on the porch of the boarding house where he rented a room. He told it at the diner over black coffee and a slice of pie. He told it to farm boys who came in to fix their father's radios, and to the widow who ran the post office, and to anyone who would sit still long enough to listen. The triangle, he called it, that patch of warm water where ships and planes went missing, where compasses lied, where his father was still, in some way he could not explain, waiting. The story changed a little each time he told it. That is how folklore works. In Ohio, the triangle grew larger. It swallowed places it had never touched. Arlen added the lights he had seen as a boy, blue and slow, moving beneath the hull of his father's boat. He added the sound the water made on quiet nights, a sound like breathing. Whether any of it had truly happened no longer mattered. The story was true in the way a hymn is true. Farmers who had never smelled the sea began to speak of it. Children in that Ohio town grew up knowing the word Bermuda before they knew the word tide. A schoolteacher borrowed Arlen's charts for a geography lesson and returned them with pencil marks in the margins. Day, traveling preacher, passed through in 1961 and worked the triangle into a sermon about the deep places God had not yet finished making. The story spread outward from that flat green town like ripples on a pond. This is the strange thing about American legends. They do not stay where they were born. They move with the people who carry them, and they take root wherever those people plant them. Arlen was not a writer. He was not a sailor by trade. He was a quiet man in a small town with grease on his hands and a compass in his pocket. But he was, without knowing it, one of the reasons the triangle became a national story instead of a regional one. He and thousands like him, people who had lost someone to the sea and carried that loss inland, telling it to anyone who would listen. America needed a haunted sea. A country this big, with a coast this long, needed a place to put its uneasy feelings about the water. The triangle became that place. It gathered up private griefs and turned them into shared myth. Arlen died in 1993 in the same boarding house where he had rented a room for 41 years. His neighbors buried him under a plain gray stone in a cemetery 1,000 miles from any ocean. But the story he told is still out there, drifting from porch to porch, from town to town, warm as the water that took his father and just as impossible to hold in your hands. The map of the world has changed since the triangle first took shape in the pulp magazines. Satellites watch every corner of the ocean now. Ships carry beacons that ping their location to distant computers every few seconds. Planes fly with black boxes and backup systems and radios that talk to towers 1,000 miles away. The warm water between Miami and Bermuda and San Juan has been photographed from space so many times you can pull it up on your phone in the dark. And still, the triangle sits there on the modern map, quiet and patient, like an old dog that refuses to leave the porch. You can find it on tourist brochures in Nassau. You can buy a t-shirt with its 3 points at the airport in Bermuda. Cruise ships pass through it every night, their decks lit up like small cities, their swimming pools glowing turquoise under the stars. Honeymoon couples sip drinks on those decks and joke about the legend. The waiters smile the way waiters smile at every joke they have heard 1,000 times. Nobody really believes anymore, and nobody really disbelieves either. That is the strange, soft place where the story lives now. Not in fear, but in a kind of gentle wondering. The triangle has become a piece of American furniture, worn smooth by the hands of everyone who has passed through it. Children learn about it in school libraries, tucked between books on dinosaurs and volcanoes. Late-night hosts still make jokes about it. Streaming shows still film episodes about it, with drone shots of blue water and dramatic music, and interviews with old men who saw something they cannot quite name. The science has mostly moved on. Insurance companies do not charge extra to sail through the region. The Coast Guard does not mark it as unusually dangerous. Statistics have run the numbers and shrugged. The ocean there loses about as many ships and planes as any other busy stretch of warm water on Earth. By every measure a rational person might use, the mystery has been quietly retired. And yet, the story keeps breathing. A small plane goes down off the Bahamas in the summer haze, and within hours the word triangle appears in headlines somewhere. A fishing boat fails to return to port in Puerto Rico, and someone on the internet draws the old three-sided shape on a screenshot of a nautical chart. The legend does not need new evidence. It only needs an old shape and a warm sea and a story that people already know by heart. Maybe that is the final question the triangle leaves us with. Not whether something waits down in the deep, not whether the compasses truly spin, or the methane truly bubbles, or the rogue waves truly rise like walls of green glass in the night. The question is quieter than that. The question is why we keep the shape at all. Why? In a world where the ocean has been measured and mapped and photographed from orbit, do we still hold on to a small patch of water where the ordinary rules feel a little softer? Perhaps the sea needs a room in it that stays dim. Perhaps we do. The rest of the map has grown so bright, so labeled, so known. Every mountain has a name. Every river has a length. Every forest has been walked through by someone with a camera and a satellite phone. The triangle is one of the last places on the American map where the lights are still turned low, where a story can still stretch out and sleep. And that is why it belongs at the sleepy end of a long night like this one. The triangle is not a horror. It never really was. It is a lullaby the country tells itself about the sea. A soft, warm hum about warm, warm water and lost ships and a compass that maybe wobbles just a little when the moon is right. A place where the impossible is allowed to keep its room, even if nobody quite lives there anymore. The satellites will keep watching. The cruise ships will keep sailing. The tourist brochures will keep printing the 3 points on their glossy folded paper, and somewhere out past the reef, past the shipping lanes, past the drifting yellow mats of Sargasso weed, the water will keep doing what water does. It will roll and shine and swallow the light of small planes crossing at dusk. It will remember every hull that ever passed above it, and it will not tell anyone what it remembers. The door stays open, the map stays soft, the warm ocean keeps its old shape, and its old silence, and its old secret, and waits for the next person who wants to lean over the railing and wonder. So here we are, at the end of the long telling. The fire has burned down to soft red coals. The wind outside has gone quiet, the way it does in the deepest part of the night, when even the trees seem to be asleep. And somewhere, far from where you are lying now, the warm water of the western Atlantic keeps rolling under a wide black sky. Think of it for a moment. The Gulf Stream still moves the way it has always moved, a slow blue river inside the ocean, carrying its warmth up from the tropics. The Sargasso Sea still floats in its enormous slow circle, golden weeds drifting like lace on the surface. Bermuda still sits pink and small against the dark water, its cliffs full of caves that nobody has fully mapped. Miami glows on the mainland. San Juan glows to the south, and between those 3 glowing points there is nothing but sea and sky and the steady breath of the trade winds. The triangle is out there, or it isn't. It depends on who you ask and how you feel and what kind of night it is. The pilots still fly across it every day. The cruise ships push through with their thousands of passengers dancing on the top decks. The cargo freighters churn along the shipping lanes with containers stacked like city blocks. Most of them arrive exactly where they meant to arrive. A few do not. A small plane goes missing off the Bahamas, and the story ripples across the internet before the sun has set. A fishing boat fails